Okay, hey everyone, welcome to another episode of On the Wrist from Off the Cuff. So a really cool review for you guys from the brand Héron. And essentially they're a Canadian micro brand producing premium timepieces made for adventure and born in Canada. Now the type of watch is a dive watch. Some key characteristics and design language you're looking for a diver. Of course you want to find water resistance. Typically some type of screw down crown. You want to have something that's tough, legible with a dive time bezel, and a diver's extension is always nice if on bracelet. This is their Marinor, and it is in the new Atlantic Blue colorway. Now this brand has kind of been on the radar for a little bit now. I mean, it is a newer brand, but I have to say they've received some great coverage and great feedback. So I was definitely keen to see what they had to offer when I connected with them. Now these go for $620 direct, and this piece was kindly lent in by the brand. So with that said, let's go ahead, zoom the camera out, get this piece in hand, and take a closer look. All right, guys, now this is a good looking watch. Check it out. Definitely gives you kind of Blancpain 50 Fathom vibes, but you know, in its own little way with a couple of twists. I mean, definitely the standout feature for me is going to be that 12 o'clock kind of North Star. It looks really, really cool. And again, it's really different, but at the same time, it fits and doesn't feel totally inorganic or gimmicky. So I can appreciate that. Another thing I really like is this Atlantic Blue colorway. Definitely has this very deep dark blue, kind of grayish hue to it, which I think is going to be ultimately super wearable. Like, this is going to be very, very versatile, whether you're wearing something like just in some type of gradient or gray colorway, or of course blue. And I think, you know, hey, blue jeans are some of the most popular you know, pants that you could wear today, and this definitely gives you something that can pair up well to denim blue. Now of course there's going to be different washes and whatnot, different styles, and there's different styles for dials, but this one again is quite a looker. Another standout feature here is the fact that this is going to have a hardness coating up to 1200 HV, which is outstanding because typically you're going to get about 200 HV for stainless steel, and then adding about 1,000 more HV here with that coating, which is very nice, which is another feature that makes this just a little bit different than every other $620 dive watch out on the market. In terms of its dimensions, really nice, super dialed in, 39 millimeter diameter, 13 millimeters thick, and that's including the crystal. And I mean, even the crystal that's on top of the bezel there, that insert even has a little bit of rise to it. Then even above that is going to be that very nice double box domed sapphire with an inner air coating. You guys can see very legible even at harsh angles, and you're only going to get the mildest distortion right there on the outer reaches of the crystal, which are really going to be of course, you know, just a nice little fun bit of distortion there, as you guys can see. So very, very cool. You know, depending on the angle, you might find a little bit of milkiness there. But the nice thing is when you're looking at it straight on, you're typically not going to see any, and it easily kind of disappears. So it's really only at very particular viewing angles you might get some of that, you know, sapphire milkiness that you sometimes try to avoid. But I will say here, it's really a non-issue for me. It doesn't stand out in any way that makes it look, you know, jarring, like it's breaking up the visual design flow. I think it looks quite good. And I mean, with the colors here, I think that might help it as well, because the color wise, it almost all just kind of flows. So I dig that. But getting to that bezel, although the grip is very, very fine, it still works really well. And the action, ooh, very nice balance of clicky and smoothness. That's something that I always look for, because some brands can be very great on that tactile kind of, you know, that ratchet. And then while others are going to really promote the action through smooth turns here. You're getting a nice balance of both. There is going to be a slight bit of rock. I wouldn't call it play because there's actually still tension on the bezel as you're turning it. So with that extra tension, you know, if you let it go or if you try to rock it a little forward or something like that, you might get a little bit of play. But I think personally this one, let me get it right there, is really nicely dialed in. So I dig that. Also, you're going to get, as you can see, that's going to be a nice bezel that's clear, which means it's probably lumed. And guess what? It is lumed. And I think that's really nice as well. Getting to the crown, it is screw down and nicely decorated, as you guys can see there. Looks like, you know, the on a ship, essentially, the wheel there, the steering wheel. I'm sure there's a better name for it, and someone will correct me down in the comments. So now's your moment. All right, now getting to the movement. Although you can't see it, you do get a nicely decorated case back there. Check that out. Let me get this very cool little silhouette there. Of course, very nice maritime theme there with the sailor wearing his captain's cap there and even smoking a pipe. So very, very nice. And underneath that motif, you're going to have the automatic Miota 9039, which is a no-date movement that has a 42-hour power reserve and a 4 hertz beat rate. So it's going to beat at 28,800 vibrations per hour. And yeah, although you can't see it through that solid engraved case back, it's nice to know that it's there so you can get that nice smooth sweep. And then the dial, guys, matte blue gradient dial, applied indices, polished hands, everything flows. They're using BGW9 Swisser Bloom Nova. So we're going to be transitioning from here with this more white Daylum to a nice blue hue when you do get into darker situations. In terms of the water resistance, here's another nice surprise, 300 meters, guys. So typically for something that looks and feels like this, I would think it'd be like a 200 meter diver, but for a 300 meter diver, like that is a nice profile. And I know some of it is just going to be visual trickery because it, you know, top to bottom, this is 13 millimeters, which isn't super thin, but I will say the way that they break down the visual weight there with the mid case, with that bevel, with the nice undercut there, with the compartmentalization between the case back, you know, playing off of the bezel, it just makes the watch look and feel quite thin, especially considering it's only a 39 millimeter watch. So with that, you would think the proportions, yeah, you know, maybe it'd look a little bigger. No, this actually has a very nice, thin, and compact profile, which I really dig. And then it's like, oh, it also has 300 meters of water resistance, which, again, a nice feature because a lot of divers in this range kind of doing this type of thing are going to be closer to 200 meters. And some that are trying to really, you know, slim things down are going to be like 150. So the fact that they went for the full 300 and it still feels beautifully slim, again, very impressive. Now getting into the bracelet here, 20 millimeter lug width, not drilled, but the nice thing is you don't really need drilled lugs when you have quick release spring bars. So that works as well. I do like drilled lugs aesthetically and functionally, but hey, I can't knock them when they do, you know, quick release spring bars. You do have everything is nicely milled, nice flat link bracelet there, fully brushed, so that's going to have a great retro aesthetic and play with the light quite nicely while still being, you know, nice and satiny and tool-like, right? And just feeling still quite serious at the same time. Now, the taper on here is going to go from 20 millimeters down to about 15.9, and everything is very, very solid here, guys. Also, another nice feature, check that out. Screw pin construction, which is just what you'd want. Also, you can have a nice milled, about 18.2 millimeter wide clasp there, fully milled. You get even some nice bevels, nice satin, nice little Héron, logo there, which also is quite nice. And then you get the tool push button action. These are nicely milled triggers on there, as you guys can see. Oh, still got some stickers, but you know what? That just kind of comes with the territory when it comes to review units. And then you have this style of micro adjust clasp. So the nice thing is it's toolless and it's also ratcheting. Not everybody likes ratcheting, but for me, I think it works. It makes things a little easier, so you don't have to press the button on the way in. You can just kind of set it, and there are going to be 5 positions of toolless micro adjustment. And bam. So you can set that. I like to make it, when it comes to these type of bracelets, I like to kind of have the most amount in there and then tighten it and then get the size. And then like if I need to then release it and relieve space, not necessarily as like a diver's extension, but hey, as the wrist swells, then you can kind of back things off very, very easily. So I dig that. But with all that said, let's actually get this piece on the wrist and see how it wears. Okay guys, as you can see on my 7.5 inch wrist, this wears quite nicely centered. Great amount of bracelet you can see from the sides there, and you can see a very nice thin profile. Check that out. Look at the organic curvature of those turned down lugs. Nice female end link, so the drape is very clean, and the links themselves are relatively short, which is going to be very helpful when it comes to dialing the watch in terms of sizing, as well as just general comfort on the wrist, considering that these links are all fully articulated. Now, if I do get my wrist a bit too close to the lens here, you're going to get a fair amount of perspective distortion. It's going to make the watch seem a lot larger because it's distorting my wrist in terms of making it feel like it's, a bit rounder. But what I'll do is keep my wrist nice and low, and as you guys can see, all of a sudden, it looks a little bit more kind of proportionate to normal, normal viewing angles from your eye. So what I like to do is keep my wrist nice and low and then just tighten up the frame, as you guys can see here. So you guys can get still a nice detailed look, but just add a bit of a truer aspect ratio as to how this may lay on your own wrist. And you guys can see beautifully centered, nicely wraps. Ooh, look at the light play there. Nothing too crazy though. It's eye-catching, but far from distracting. Everything flows really well into that bracelet there, to the clasp, the push buttons. Things flow quite organically. I like the play of, flat surfaces with the satin. And then you're going to get some rounder surfaces, of course, when you're looking at the iconography of the dial, of the bezel, of the indices. And then, yeah, you have quite a few angles mixed in there. Check out this viewing angle, which really shows you how well this hugs the wrist. Beautiful high polished bevel there on the tops of the lugs, nicely sculpted crown guards, and you can see of course that signed crown. And then you can see the crystal itself flows very nicely, and although it does give you a bit of physical height as it's lifting and elevating off of the height of the bezel, which is elevating off the height of the case, it doesn't add a whole lot of heftiness or anything like that. And I think visually your eye can kind of separate that, right? You see that, okay, well, I'm noticing the volume of the watch is really related to that mid case, right? Because everything is compartmentalizing quite nicely in terms of the way that it lays. Like, look how thin that looks. I really like that. And then you get there and it's like, ooh, look at that. This is a good looking watch. And again, this is something that, it kind of passed me by. I'd scroll through, see some things for it, and it looked good, but it didn't really jump out to me. I have to say, in the metal, though, it does jump out. There's something about the way these details come together that definitely it's just a cohesive vibe. And that's one of the things I look for, are those types of themes where it's just well executed. Things come together. There's no gimmick. There's no, kind of this or that or guesswork. It just is a good looking watch that, it's going to stand the test of time thanks to a very nice symmetrical and classic layout. But at the same time, when you do have it, you can still find ways to enjoy it, and it doesn't come off as being too boring, generic, or plain. It still has enough pizzazz and visual interest to really keep you engaged. And I mean, part of that is, yes, it's a very basic layout, but then you add the little kind of gradation on the dial, a little kind of fume pattern where it's brighter towards the center, then darker towards the outer. And then, of course, the little contours on top of the crystal, on top of the bezel insert, juxtaposing themselves against all of these nice flat fine angles that are all over the bracelet and the case. So yeah, there's definitely a lot to like here. But with that said, let's actually get this now off the wrist, set up for some Lume shots, low light transition, and closing thoughts. Okay, let's go ahead and hit the lights here. Ooh, there you have it. Nice bright blue Lume. Of course, the bezel insert is going to fade a bit quicker because ultimately it's underneath a layer, so it's not like they can really make that very thick. And then it's also not super wide, but will be nice and give it a little extra punch with some UV power here to really give you a nice idea of that Lume. So very cool. I dig it. Great cardinal reference there where you can see your positioning where 12 o'clock is versus 6, 3, or 9. And then, of course, you do get a nice reference there for your diving bezel. So, yeah, not the brightest. Could be brighter. Would be nice. But at the same time, it's nice that it doesn't shine through, which is another thing I've seen, for these types of, sapphire inserts where sometimes like the light, the brightness can bleed through actually apart from where the actual indexing is. So I like that that's clean and well executed, although maybe just could be slightly brighter. In actuality, you're not going to be depending on this. This is a little, more than a little nice in terms of like what you would probably want to actually be diving with. Although this would be completely capable, if it was some type of whatever life or death situation where you're going to be relying on your bezel illumination, you probably have a couple of other options, whether they be dive computers or more traditional simple divers like from Seiko or something like that when you really need to rely on something. But one thing I always like to work in is going to be a bit of a low light transition because I was going to be out in the middle of a field enjoying direct sunlight. So it is nice to see what these colors, textures, and finishes render like in less than optimal lighting. And I have to say, guys, this grayish blue, this Atlantic blue colorway is just fantastic. I dig this. And look at that. You can see the gradation on the dial, that kind of fume pattern where it's brighter towards the center and darker towards the outer reaches. It does add a nice little dimension in the same way that there's a little bit of dimensionality played in by the crystal, whether it be the main sapphire or the sapphire insert on the bezel. And man, look at that. That just, again, it's just like that contrast of the round still flowing, but then you still have some nice flat surfaces as well and hard compound angles. Look at the way the light just very smoothly transitions there consistently over that satin brush. Very, very nice. Ooh, I'm digging this. And then that blue, look at the way the blue, even if I try to wash out the dial, it's going to remain very, very legible. And I'd say the bezel insert is going to be a little bit more consistent in terms of its colorway, while the dial is going to be a little bit more dynamic and kind of play with the light quite a bit. All right, guys. This is a good looking watch. Look at that blue tone, that grayish blue hue. There is something about it that it's really speaking to me. So closing thoughts, guys, great proportions on the wrist. Very comfortable and balanced wear. The hard coating really adds confidence for daily wear, which is much appreciated on my side. In terms of model variants, definitely check the site links for current options and availability, as they do typically have quite a few different variations. And they do them in kind of batches as well. Like if you go to their site right now and look at the history of these model lines, there's quite a few different variants. But for me, this one really stood out. Now, in terms of comparable models, there are a lot of options out there in this price range with similar movements and specs, but I will say probably the Traska Freediver would be, the closest comparable. So it's definitely great company to be in. When you're getting the hardened coating, here you are getting an extra bit of water resistance, right? Up to 300 meters. So that's very nice. And then this is definitely going to feel, I guess you could say a little bit more, just dynamic overall. It's less trying to kind of be everything and more focused on being something in particular and doing it really well. So it's going to have a little bit more of a focused vertical in terms of its design. And I dig that. Of course, I love the good old vanilla style diver that kind of goes with everything. But something like this, these little quirks that they have, I gotta say they stand out. And I've, over the years, I've come to appreciate the quirks and the things that, the imperfections of watches that really make them quite memorable and even can justify their reason to exist, whether they be existing in a catalog or, in your watch box or on your wrist. So for me, guys, bottom line, create vintage inspired looks that really capture the essence of the Blancpain 50 Fathoms without going overboard as a direct homage. And this Atlantic Blue colorway in particular hits a real sweet spot in terms of tonality, versatility, and overall just wearability. So with that said, let me know what you all think down in the comments below. If you liked the video, please do a like, and if you haven't already, please subscribe for more content just like this. Thanks, guys.